Hello, my name is Brian Burke, a recycling specialist with the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, Waste Management and Radiological Protection Division. Today I'm going to be recording one of a series of informational modules on the proposed legislative changes to Michigan Solid Waste Management Law, Part 115 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, NEREPA. The modules are intended to provide an update to interested parties on the most recent version of the proposed changes. Please note that the legislative changes proposed to date are in draft form and are subject to further changes. Furthermore, the registration and general permit requirements discussed in this module are also in draft form and are subject to further changes. This module will cover requirements for all materials utilization facilities and specific requirements for materials recovery facilities. Composting facilities, anaerobic digesters, and innovative technology or practice facilities will be covered in a separate module. Along with the more conventional landfill and transfer station disposal areas and specialized waste diversion centers, such as household hazardous waste or electronic waste collection sites, materials utilization facilities are included in the definition of a materials management facility. Materials utilization facilities are a key part of an overall focus to include sustainable materials management options other than disposal. It is important to note that materials management facilities do not include facilities whose principal business is the processing and manufacturing of iron, steel, or non-ferrous metals. A materials utilization facility includes the following: materials recovery facility or MRF, composting facility, anaerobic digester, and an innovative technology or practice facility. MRFs will be discussed further in the presentation, and the other facilities will be covered in a separate module. In order to provide a level playing field in the growing materials management industry, additional regulatory oversight of facilities that manage those materials is needed to minimize potential environmental impacts and provide regulatory clarity. Siting and operational provisions, including notifications, registrations, and general permits based on the type and size of the facility, along with consistent regular inspections, will assist in providing this clarity. Here is a listing of some of the operational requirements consistent between each of the types of materials utilization facilities. Facilities that are required to have a registration or general permit will have additional requirements that will be addressed later in the module and in the composting digester innovative technology module. The specific language for the operational requirements can be found in section 11568, subparagraph 1 of the draft legislation. Some of the key requirements include complying with parts 31 and 55 of NEREPA, which address water and air quality standards, no overnight storage of materials except in a secure location and with adequate containment to prevent any release of the material, limiting access to the facility to a time when a responsible individual is on duty, data collection and reporting requirements, and ensuring on an annual basis that the volume of solid waste residuals is less than 15% of the total volume of material received, with some exceptions for MRFs, which will be discussed later. A separate module on how the proposed legislative changes interact with the DEQ's existing retract reporting system in Part 175 of NEREPA, Michigan's existing recycling reporting law, is available for viewing. This slide lists some of the notification, registration, and permit requirements for all materials utilization facilities. Depending on the type and size of the facility, different requirements will apply. Facilities must be consistent with the County Materials Management Plan, must operate in compliance with the terms of any registrations or permits, and must notify or complete an application for a registration or permit from the DEQ within 90 days if an increase in the volume of material accepted or a change in the type of material managed triggers a change in the requirements. For example, a change in the volume of managed material on site at any time at a MRF may require the MRF to register with the DEQ. Again, this must be done within 90 days, either the notification or to complete an application or a registration. It doesn't mean you actually have to have a registration or a permit. All applications shall be in proper format and contain relevant information. Facilities required to register or obtain a general permit shall submit a site map and operations plan. Facilities required to obtain a general permit shall also submit a final closure plan. In addition, Section 11568 describes the different prescribed time periods that existing operating facilities are required to notify, register, or obtain a general permit within. For example, a small composting facility has 1 year from the effective date of the Act to notify the DEQ. Any facility requiring a general permit is required to submit a complete application within 2 years. As described in Section 11569, subparagraph 1, the DEQ will review the existing operations of facilities that are already operating to determine if they comply with Part 115. If they do not currently comply, the DEQ will issue a schedule of measures that will lead to compliance within a reasonable time period, no longer than 1 year from the determination of noncompliance. I'm now going to focus specifically on MRFs, which means a facility that meets both requirements listed. The draft legislation recognizes both recycling contamination and recycling in-market concerns by both of the following: allowing facilities to exceed the 15% volume of solid waste residuals requirement, provided that the facility has an education program and has taken reasonable measures to reduce the amount of contamination, and allowing facilities that may need to dispose of a material due to changing in-market conditions to not have to include the volume of that material in their 15% solid waste residual calculation. A MRF does not include the following: an establishment that bales and ships its own managed materials, a retailer that collects returnable beverage containers as defined in Michigan's existing beverage container law, a beverage distributor or its agent that manages returnable beverage containers, and an end user or secondary processor of recycled materials generated by an industrial facility. This slide discusses what MRFs need to be registered and or permitted, including electronic waste processors not required to register and report under Part 173 of NEREPA, Michigan's existing electronics law. If not registered under Part 173, facilities that collect and process electronics are defined as either a waste diversion center, which have their own operating requirements, or a materials recovery facility subject to the following registration and general permit requirements. A separate module on how the proposed legislative changes interact with the existing electronics law is available for viewing. MRFs that process greater than 100 tons of material in a year and do not have more than 100 tons of managed material on site at any time must register with the DEQ. MRFs currently operating would have to register within 1 year of the effective date of the Act. MRFs that have greater than 100 tons of managed material on site at any time must obtain a general permit with the DEQ. MRFs currently operating must obtain a general permit within 2 years of the effective date of the Act. These are specific requirements for MRFs that need to be registered. The requirements are the same as those for all materials utilization facilities, except for the registration term time period. The main difference between the general operating requirements for all materials utilization facilities and MRFs that need to be registered are the requirement to submit a site map and an operations plan. The next two slides describe the specific requirements that would be included in a general permit for a MRF. The general permit language is still in draft form. The DEQ is planning to make the final draft version available for review and comment as soon as possible. Some of the additional requirements beyond the general operating requirements for all materials utilization facilities include a site map and an operations plan, a final closure plan, financial assurance, all materials to be kept under a roof or cover, residue storage and removal, and adequate fire and emergency equipment being available, including arrangements with local emergency response agencies. Each materials utilization facility that is required to obtain a general permit must provide financial assurance. MRFs are required to have a bond in the amount of $20,000. The bond must remain in effect until the MRF has ceased accepting material, removed all managed and stored material from the site, and had the facility closure certification approved by the DEQ. This concludes the recording of this module. Thank you for viewing and your interest in refocusing Michigan's solid waste law on identifying and prioritizing the highest and best use of materials. Please direct any questions regarding this module and any other questions on the proposed legislation to Liz Brown, Special Projects Administrator, at the contact information listed.